Hello, everybody. It's Romania Black, and we are on episode 15 of Monster. And man, the last episode didn't have Tenma in it, except in spirit. And we got a in-depth look at both Eva as well as Lunge's kind of descent into madness as we see the inner workings of their personal lives and how they've completely fallen apart. And how Lunge really only has the case with Tenma left for him. His family's left him, and he's just left with this case with Tenma. And Eva is so self-destructive, she can't even forge a relationship with anyone else. She's only left with the ghost of Tenma. And so both of them teaming up to take him down. Meanwhile, our sweet teddy bear Tenma is slowly descending further and further into an obsession with Johan. It's fascinating, to say the least. But I do have some comments before we start this episode. But I was floored last episode that we went a totally different trajectory into totally new territory that I was not expecting. So there's that. But before we go any further, Dana, back in episode 12, was talking about Johan standing atop in the throne in that flashback, was very similar to a Twilight Zone episode called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And I've watched a little bit of the Twilight Zone, but I'm easily scared, so I don't watch a lot of it. Some of the episodes freaked me out as a kid. The one with the monster on the airplane wing still gives me nightmares and the creeps. Nah. But in that episode, an alien notes humans pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, and it's themselves. And I'm like, yeah. And also, I like that the idea in the episode is all we can do is sit back and watch. So yeah, that seems very akin to Monster. It's like the real monster are the humans themselves and just how far they devolve and kind of regress to this point, right? And we've seen that with Johan, and we're slowly seeing it with Tenma, and that's problematic, correct? So I like the idea that Dana also says Kinderheim and Hartman have the words kind and heart in them, but they seem devoid of both. Seems kind of like a surface versus what's under the surface thing. Very interesting to note. And then Almond. Almond, I really liked this comment. This puts a lot of things in perspective. Almond, Tenma leaving Dieter at the bus stop in episode 12 isn't just like a modern versus current thing, because I talked about in the reaction how, in modern day, you'd never leave a kid in a bus stop, you'd follow them. But then we were talking in the comments about, back in the day in the 90s, people let their kids run around a mall and not worry about anything, and it's different now. But Almond said, yeah, the old Tenma of episodes 1 through 4 would not have done that. They wouldn't have left Dieter at a bus stop. They would have made sure that they got to that orphanage. But yeah, he's become so obsessed with Johan that he was willing to just put Dieter on a bus and strap a 5 to him, wish the best of luck, and said, okay, bye. And that's just, it's showing and not telling that Tenma is becoming more and more obsessed with going after Johan. And I don't want confirmation on this, by the way. I want to be surprised to see to what extent, if this is true. I feel like Tenma is going to become a monster because he's going to keep trying to get a hold of Johan, and it's going to cause him to compromise all the morals that he has to chase after this one person to try to rectify a mistake that he believes he made by letting him live. Now, whether or not that happens, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more complications with that, I don't know. Maybe Tenma, being a healer and a doctor, will allow him to overcome the idea of that. We'll find out, but that's just where my headspace is right now at this story, and it feels very tragic, right? And that kind of goes with Alex Cornejo's comment. If you've not watched Mob Psycho 100, first of all, you should. It's amazing. But second, you may not get this reference, but Alex Cornejo was like, Reagan would not approve of Tenma and Schumann's parenting. And I was like, no, Reagan is the adult of adults when it comes to taking care of a kid, and they would probably not approve of Tenma and Schumann's methods here in episode 12 and episode 13. But I like this idea that I talked about with Alex of Tenma inspires people to help through faith. The patience that he has, the people that he meets, they develop this faith in Tenma because they see how good he is, right? And he develops this repertoire with them, and so they end up helping him because they have faith in him that he's a good person. Whereas Johan gets help through fear. He he makes people fear him, and they help him because they're afraid they're going to die. So I'm very curious to see. I don't imagine Johan becoming someone like Tenma that inspires through faith, but I'm going to be curious to see, like, how far is Tenma going to fall, and how deep into this obsession is he going to get? Where is it going to lead him? What are the consequences of it? What do we do with that? So obviously I want to be surprised. I don't want answers, but it's going to be fascinating to see how we go through the series and how things progress. But I'm worried about Tenma. I really am, because I worry about him not only because now Eva and Lunge are after him, and the thing of it is, I don't think Johan cares. I think Johan is not worried about Tenma because he knows when it comes down to it, he's like, eh. And the question is Tenma going to be able to actually shoot him or not? I don't think he will. I think he'll hesitate. I don't think he's going to fire like Hugo told him. That's going to be the question, right? That's going to be it, and we'll see. But I don't know. I don't know. So we'll see, though, right? We'll see. We're only on episode 15. We got lots of episodes to go, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to start episode 15 of Monster and see what we get. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, what was this episode? What we leave Tenma for one episode to touch base on something else. We come back, and this was like a hurricane of insanity. Just, oh my God, it was so tense. Things happened in this episode. Oh my God. I don't know if I will be able to wait to watch episode 16. I don't think I will. Because Tenma getting hit by a car, I thought he was, hurt there, and then this baby is like beating him up with a billiard stick. Let me say first and foremost, the baby character is basically the little man from Twin Peaks, right? Basically. But also, I feel now, having watched Soul Eater, another anime from the early 2000s, that the character in that series was highly influenced by the baby in Monster, because doing like the snaps and just the way that he enters the frame. If you've ever watched Soul Eater, find the lounge scene, and which, granted, the lounge scene in hindsight seems like it's inspired a lot by Twin Peaks, because it has like the red and black like patterns similar to Twin Peaks in the Black Lodge. But also just the way that he entered the frame with the symbol and everything of the eye and stuff, all cultish. I'm fully convinced now that the Soul Eater demon that is inside Soul is very much inspired by both Twin Peaks and Baby from Monster. Oh my gosh, like all the references coming to light, right? Wow, yeah, so I love it. So it's great. But yeah, this episode, lots happened. Lots of thematic things getting brought up. I'm glad we brought the one detective back. He's not been doing well. There's lots of timeline things that we get kind of established. And then poor Heckle with Dieter. I feel like they're in a bad spot because they're going to let fire this Turkish district, and Heckle and Dieter are in the middle of it. I feel like my hope is that Heckle, we get little images that Heckle, he has a good heart underneath it all. Underneath his thieving, conniving self, he has a good heart. And I'm hoping that if Dieter is put into danger, that Heckle will come back and help him and will save him. That is my hope, that Heckle will do the right thing and save Dieter if worse comes to worse. But so yeah, I brought White Raccoon out because it was needed. Nina, oh my God, Nina girl, what we doing? What we doing? Because we got the bar and everything candy, right? Like taking candy from a baby. Yeah, so we bring SL up here. That I want to put down kind of historical thematic things, because there's a lot of that going on. getting into some racial issues, some heavy stuff, thinking Johann is the second coming of Hitler. Why not? And so then I want to touch base on Nina here. There's not as much to talk about with Nina. I'm glad we end up with her character where it goes than where I thought. I thought for a second that maybe she was going down, she's still going down a pretty dark path, but a much darker path than I originally thought. And then we also need to talk about Tenma. Bring in poor Tenma into this, because there's some noticeable things about his character in this episode that did not go unnoticed. And then we have, of course, bless his heart, our thief, Heckle, and Dieter. I'll bring them up here. I also want to touch base on Johann. We're going to put Johann kind of down here at the bottom. I think under Nina, because I don't have nearly as much with Nina, I think, as I'm going to talk about here. But we'll put that there. Oh my gosh. So we have the bar, the bar scene. I love the setup of this, right? The setup of her walking into the bar, like she's hurrying in there. She wants to meet the baby, wants to get to Johann, and she's found out there's a connection. And we know now she learned from the detective that the baby is trying to get in contact with Johann. She gets in contact with the baby, then she's going to be able to find Johann. We find all that out, right? Make note, there's definitely a certain clientele in this bar. But we cannot escape Neon Genesis, right? We cannot escape it. Her Masato walking into that bar, that shot, it's so iconic now, right? But apparently she keeps coming in here, right? Coming in here dressed all scantily. And all these guys here, which they're there for the reason. This guy that looks like Bouffant Flock, and this guy that looks kind of like Becker, which is odd. For a second I thought it was Becker, and I was like, why is he here? He says, if you want to do business, get permission from the state. So I had this idea of a business permit for prostitution, which is interesting. I know nothing about prostitution, so I'm quite illiterate on this subject, and I don't know much about the historical red light district in Germany during this time, so I feel like a history lesson will probably happen in the comments, but to this end, I do not know as much. But he says unlicensed prostitutes are a nuisance. So apparently the idea of licensed prostitution is just a thing. It's a thing. What can we do? She says, I can't make much money if I do it legitimately. And they tell her to get out. Again, much like Neon Genesis, I like the detail in the animation where they put the lipstick on the cigarette. It's great. She says, I just have to get permission from him, don't I? Let me meet him. And they're talking about baby. I'll keep coming until you let me meet him. The man known as the baby. I don't like seeing Nina smoke. I feel like a parent being like, put the cigarette down, girl. I feel like Tenma would probably tell her the same. Oh my gosh, it's so bizarre. So then we cut to Dieter. And Heckle, of all people. There has been some time pass. Heckle looks a little bit different. But I like that Tenma has placed Heckle with Dieter. And Dieter trusts Tenma until he said he had to go meet a man. And so that's the situation. I feel Dieter trusts Tenma enough at this point, for better or worse. He's also a kid. So, in the back of your brain, you'd be like, meeting a man, gonna kill a man, put two and two together. An adult would make that assumption and put two and two together to realize what Tenma's doing. But Dieter's a child. He does not. So instead he ends up with Heckle. And we get the idea that Heckle has a good heart, right? He has a good heart. He owes Tenma. And at the end of the day, he's kind enough to stick with Dieter, right? Because if he had been a truly awful man, he would have just left Dieter there and just ran off to do his business, right? And Heckle has no clue about Johann. That's the thing. Heckle has no clue about Tenma's, connection to go kill someone. So he probably thinks Tenma's going to go help a patient or something. That's probably where he's at. And he's like, why does he want me to look after you? Because honestly, Heckle is the only one that Tenma trusts. He's the only one Tenma can turn to right now. He doesn't have anybody else. That's the sad thing. He's like, no. He's like, I hate kids. Classic. I loved Alex Cornejo made the comment saying that, or maybe it was Edgar. It was one of you two made the comment saying that we think tsunderes are these girls with pigtails, but the truth of the matter is they're actually middle-aged men. Middle-aged men are actually the tsunderes. I was like, yes. And Heckle's one of them. He's like, I don't like kids, says the man that's going to love Dieter and probably protect him. Right? What I love about this series is that they give us characters that on the surface seem a certain way, and then it works both ways. You have characters that seem slimy on the outside, and then when we get to know them, we're like, no, you actually have a heart of gold. And then characters that seem like they're well-to-do turn out to be absolute scum. So it's a fun time. And Dieter, I like Dieter's got a new jacket and some new clothes, so that's good. He doesn't just have the overalls on. He says he didn't give me a warming and picks up some strange kid. Yeah, so some time has passed, and Heckle's like, well, Tenma didn't say he was picking up a kid. What's going on here? What happened to making money as an unlicensed doctor? What happened to those simple days? Get a real job. I love it. I love that Heckle is heckling. It's great. And then Dieter, like, kicks the ball at him and is trying to teach Heckle how to play soccer. It's absolutely cute. He's like, why did I end up with this man, with this kid? So then we cut to the detective, right? The detective who's trying to get drugs. So we get a little bit with the timeline, right? So it has been 10 months since, Johan had Nina's parents killed. It's been nearly a year. That's a long amount of time. And so we find out that 3 months after this moment, the detectives were let go. Which is so frustrating in a way, right? Because what that suggests is that because Tenma didn't want to go to the police originally because he was afraid that some of the police were in Johan's pocket. So he waited and got out of the hospital and stuff, and that's what led to him going on the run. And the frustrating thing is, like, only 3 months later, those guys were let go. So it almost feels like, in one vein, it feels like it didn't matter, and it was just so pointless that he left. But then the other vein, we don't know how many other police officers are connected to Johan. So it probably would have ended up being the same situation, but it is so frustrating knowing the detectives were only there for a short amount of time afterwards, and then were let go. And it's like, it's so frustrating. I also think it's curious that there's a connection to the detective looking super sketchy and like looking around like afraid at every corner, and Tenma in the intro in the OP looking kind of the same way. So there seems to be like a little parallel there at work, which is kind of creepy, but what do we do? And then he goes to make the drug deal and sees that it's Tenma. He's like, give me the drugs now. His face when he sees Tenma is absolutely disturbing. It's so creepy. And Tenma's just like, it's been a while, Mesner. It's so creepy how cold Tenma is. That's something that I want to make note of, is that Tenma, he is very cold and detached in this episode because of his quest. Right? At this point, he cares about finding Johan because he wants to kill him. But then he has a reaction towards Nina because, again, she is somebody that he is tied to responsibly. And he knows that she is a target of Johan. So it's kind of a by proxy situation where Tenma, he's obsessed with Johan, wants to kill him to like take responsibility for letting him live. But Nina kind of becomes an accessory in that because he feels like if she goes after Johan, then that's her. She's a connection to something he's responsible for. So he has to take responsibility for her too, right? But oh my God. And Tenma just wants answers. He's like, you called me that then. He's like, I found this article what does he say? I was kind of like trying to read German in that moment. And Tenma recognizes that he's an ex-doctor. He's fully, that I think is very important, that Tenma establishes he's no longer a doctor. That makes me nervous because, you know, even at his moral core, if he realized he was going after Johan and potentially going to kill him, at the end of the day, he's like, well, you know, I'm doing this, but I'm a healer, I'm a doctor. He's pushing that aside now, which makes me nervous, because if he starts to think that he's no longer a doctor, then maybe Tenma's going to slowly start to think he no longer has this moral code anymore, and that's problematic. So I don't like that at all. No, he says, I'm an ex-doctor. And so he says, come to think of it, you're an ex-detective. See, I saw suspendiert and thought that meant suspended, but I didn't read the line of dialogue that comes after this. He says, detective dismissed on suspicions of narcotic use. So yeah, so this guy had a drug problem and he got out. And the detective was like, what do you want? He's like, I want to know what you did 10 months ago at Heidelberg. He's like, and who hired you to do it? Obviously, we know it's Johan. Obviously. He's just trying to get confirmation. And the detective says that Mueller is the one who, he says, I was the lookout. Mueller's the one that killed Muir and the others. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. He says he took the money and is doing quite well. So we don't know where Mueller is at this point. He left. He says, you used all your money on drugs and ended up like this. He's like, well, he took the request. He did the killing. He got the larger portion of the reward. Someone even tried to kill me to keep me silent. Which makes sense because he's told Nina everything and now he's told Tenma. One thing that I want to make note of how Tenma looks in this episode is he just looks with such contempt towards Messner. That is so fascinating to me because he gives Messner such like a judgmental look in this episode. And if you compare that back to him with Junkers, like with Junkers, he was like, oh, you know, you were a criminal, but you can get better. Things are going to be right as rain for you. You just turn things around, right? That hopeful optimism. With Messner, he doesn't give him that look at all. He like judges him almost. And even that point where he's like, you're suffering from withdrawal symptoms, aren't you? Like he's just become so judgmental. I don't like seeing Tenma like turn this leaf of being so cold. He's like, I'm surprised you're still alive. He says, I was saved by a certain organization. So, Messner, we'll put this on here. Messner was saved by an organization. Okay. That's just what we're left with, right? And he's like, that's enough. I've already spoken too much. It's like, yep. And he's like, before to whom? And he's like, leave me alone. Like, he's like, I don't have time for it. And yeah, Tenma's just so cold when he's like, you're having withdrawal symptoms, huh? He's like, the drug dealers won't approach you while I'm sitting here. Like, he's just so cold. Like, again, ex-doctor. He isn't looking at Messner as a patient or as someone needing help. He's just looking at Messner like he's pitiful. And I don't know if I like that because Tenma's always been someone that at the start of the series didn't seem to think that he was better than anyone. But in this scene with Messner, he definitely acts like he's better than Messner. And I'm like, Messner's suffering from withdrawals of his drug, but I'm like, Tenma, you're kind of on the same path, right? Your drug is finding out about Johan, right? So it's fascinating that there's that judgment there, right? And so he asks Messner to give him information. And Messner's like, well, he's like, because, yeah, Tenma's like, I can't, once I leave, you'll get your drugs. But he uses that to lure the information out of Messner. He's like, once I leave, you'll get your drugs, right? So if you just tell me what I want to know, I'll go and you can get your fix. And that's when Messner starts talking, saying the baby saved him. So the baby, the organization is this creepy cult. It's this creepy cult with the baby. There's 4 members that are, the baby is one of them, of the members that are starting this, right? And that sparks Tenma. He's like, the baby. For a while, it's easy to think that Johan would be the baby because he's baby-faced. He's got a youthful face. But then when we see the man, it's like, okay, no, never mind. At the pub called Candy. And he's like, who is the baby? And he says he's a big-name right-wing extremist. Okay, so this organization, it's right-wing, very extreme, very racist. Not into, when the one lady's like, yeah, you'll probably get killed if you go in there. He says he's an executive of 2 right-wing political parties. So the baby, put here, he is tied to political parties. The fact that he says 2, I don't know anything about German politics, but that almost makes me think that maybe he has connections to both sides of the aisle, and it's like, well, that's problematic. He says after the wall fell, the baby went to Dresden on the east side. So we talk about the wall fell and baby went to Dresden in the east. All right. He went there and tried to make a town of only pure German people. So tried to make a pure, quote unquote, German town. Gross. So, yes, we failed and came back. Yeah. Why did that man save you? Well, because he's blonde, I'm sure. He says the darkness. When the Berlin Wall fell, a great darkness was born. So, they say a darkness and or monster was born when the wall fell. Now, what's kind of curious about this, and I'd have to go back to the beginning of the series, but I thought that Johan and Nina came over with the Lieberts before the wall fell. That was before that happened. So, and that the whole thing with Kinderheim was before the wall fell as well. So it's almost like Messner is trying to give blame to the wall falling and creating Johan as a monster. But we, the audience, know that no, Johan was already kind of a monster before this even happened. So they're trying to put blame on the wall falling for creating Johan, but that's not it either. No. Again, we go back to this whole nature versus nurture thing with Johan. I think Johan was like this from the start, regardless of what happened around him. But that's fascinating that he's blaming it on the wall falling. Saying a monster was born. I'm like, no, monster's been around. I mean, we've had all these scenarios of Johan being like, was it the wall falling that made him? Was it Tenma saving him that made him? Or was it something else? Was he always like that from the start? That's a very big question, and we don't know an answer for sure yet. That's what this whole series is about. But Tenma's like, oh, a monster must be Johan, because every time somebody refers to him, that's what it ends up being. And then that's when Dresner says he told the rest to the girl. He was told the baby that I was to send the girl to him if she appeared, because she's going to be bait. She's going to be bait. She's important bait. So yeah, Nina is basically being used. She's being used to lure Johan to the group. But she wants to kill him. Okay. That's all we got. So that's where we're at. And of course, Tenma runs like the Dickens to go back and find her as she's basically getting permission to see. When this guy grabs her, I was ready for her to kick his ass. I was like, dude, she knows self-defense. But one, I'm glad she didn't do it, because that would have revealed that she knows how to defend herself. And two, it would have made a scene that would have made things worse for her. So I'm glad she had some restraint. But I'm also like, dude, you're the worst. And then this guard with the giant forehead shows up and leads her to this creepy back room. I just want to say, the big marble columns and everything, cool. The rugs, cool. But there's just something ominous about this giant mirror and this solitary, creepy chair in front of it, like a waiting room. Just something very eerie and disturbing about it. I don't like it. And then he tells her to go in there and to stand on the rug. But I'll be honest, what's also curious in this is that there's lots of relics and antiques. Like there's something that looks like it's maybe from Hinduism in the back there, like the statue of, like, looks like a god or a goddess in the back. For an organization that is trying to promote like a pure ethnic group, they have a lot of merchandise and antiques from other cultures that are not their own. I feel like that's saying something, but I don't know. It just feels like a little hypocritical. I'm just saying, because a lot of the structures and designs, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that statue in the corner is not German, but you do you. And he's like, wait on that symbol. Yeah, the eye, nope. And he makes her stand like right on it. It's weird. It's creepy. And then he puts the music on. I wonder if they were like testing to see if she's somebody they could hypnotize. Maybe like seeing if she was, susceptible to something like that. I feel like she would be because she's had all this psychological stuff go on. But then we have the baby come in dancing. It's creepy. He's wearing the same kind of plum outfit that she's wearing. Feels Twin Peaks. It's just so disturbing. Yep. Feels odd. And Tenma, meanwhile, is just racing to go find her. I'm like, dude, the baby said that she's important. The baby said this country will be all right when the second Hitler is born. So they have this theory, right? The creepy cult has this theory that they want the second Hitler to come. And their theory is that Hitler didn't hit his stride till his 30s, is what they're saying. And so they're wanting Johann to get involved. And I guess they think once Johann hits his 30s, he'll be good to go. But they also make note that Johann already had way more charisma as a child than Hitler did at the same time. So they're all convinced that Johann is going to become... They basically liken him even to Christ. We'll get into that. There's lots of theories that, Hitler was the Antichrist and that we beat him. So... I read a theory once in a class years ago that the Antichrist isn't just one solitary being, that it's something that pops up throughout history that tests humanity over and over again. I kind of like that theory that the Antichrist has been something that's maybe been present throughout history and it's been something humanity's overcome. However you want to look at that. I think it's an interesting theory. But I've read that years ago and said that Hitler was just one of many that had tried to be like the Antichrist and had been able to sway masses, and in the end, humanity prevailed over them. You can take that with any religious context that you want, whatever you want to do, but I thought that was fascinating. And Tim was like, gotta stop Hitler. So, but this part's interesting, where the baby says, Nina Fortner, Anna Liebert, neither is your real name. But names don't really matter. So, yeah, I do think this is fascinating that we don't know her real name. But as the story suggests, that's not important. I mean, Johann is just a name, but they call him the monster. At the end of the day, names are, they're just literally labels. It doesn't matter in the end, right? He says, after all, I'm called the baby. And he tells her to dance, and she's like, no. She wants to know where her brother is. And the fact that they are so calm during this moment of her with the gun, good on her to keep the secret gun strapped to her thigh. Good on her. Good on Nina Fortner. Like, she came prepared. I like her. Like, Nina's grown on me a lot. I like her character a lot, being like, nah. As we do. So, interestingly enough, we have with Heckel, we go back to Heckel and Dieter, and they talk about... Heckel says, I lived in this area when I was a kid, so I know all the back alleys. He's like, there's an antique dealer further down. I'm going to trade this rug in for money. And I like that Dieter's like, you don't have any money, Mr. Heckle? And he's like, shut up. I want to get you extra money so I can buy you food. So be thankful, right? But Heckle says that he grew up in this district that he notices later on has become a Turkish district. Because he thinks he can just haggle the guy in the rug store, but the guy in the rug store has an authentic Turkish rug, right? And because he looks at the trade thing and it's in Turkish, right? That he can read, and he looks around reading. Now Dieter, he looks around and sees all the signs, and looks around and sees all the people, right? And the people there aren't what he remembered from that neighborhood. And he says, oh. And Dieter's like, what's wrong? This whole area has become a Turkish district. Now, Dieter is a kid who does not understand racial differences. He's a child. And so he doesn't get it. And we don't know what Dieter's reading level is. So he doesn't notice that the languages on the sign has changed to Turkish or not. But Heckle does notice. Now, Heckle doesn't seem disgusted by the fact that it's a Turkish district. He just seems kind of bamboozled, like, oh, I didn't realize this area had changed so much. So he just seems kind of confused. But it's interesting to note, we're getting into some heavier subject matter, and I'll be honest, as a Caucasian woman, it's a little out of my comfort zone. I obviously cannot speak to racial tension because I'm a white woman, but I feel like it's fascinating that the mangaka is taking this time to historically touch on something that, as you all have noted in the comments, was a very real thing in the 80s and 90s, and touching on tensions that were there, that had been building there. And I like that it impacts the story. It's just, setting is important, right? And a lot of writers and a lot of readers, I feel like as an English teacher, setting is the most overlooked element of fiction, I feel, as a teacher. I feel like my students, when we talk about the elements of fiction, people mention characters, they mention the plot, they mention point of view, talk about style, talk about theme, talk about symbolism, but setting is often the most taken for granted element of a story, because people are just like, oh, it's where it takes place, and that's it, right? But no, I like that the mangaka in this story takes the time to say, no, setting is very important, not only location-wise, but historically. Like, where are we time-wise? How is that influencing how people are thinking? How does that influence people? Because, yeah, the fact that this is taking place in 90s Germany post the Berlin Wall falling, and in Germany post World War II, has a significant impact on the way characters are thinking and interact with each other. So I like the mangaka is making setting an important element of this story, because oftentimes it's just something superfluous that doesn't have a lot of meaning, right? So I like that the author is taking time to do that. Now, Dieter is rather innocent and doesn't understand that Heckle is trying to, sell off this rug that's a fake. And I love that the guy behind the counter is just like, okay, yeah, sure, whatevs. Like, he's just not even fazed by it, right? But that's when he knows, the real rug. And Heckle gets inspired to steal it, because he's like, that's a real high quality rug. He's like, 150,000 marks. I could get 3 times as much as that if I stole it. And Dieter, I love that Dieter is like, hey, let's go get something to eat instead. No, let's not do it. And he's like, be quiet. He's like, if I get that, you can eat all you want. And Dieter's like, well, how? Why would we get it? And he's like, oh, just leave that to me. And Dieter immediately knows what that means. I love Dieter has the very judgmental child face of, Mr. Adult, you're doing something that's not very appropriate for an adult. I like Dieter's like, you're a thief. And he's like, shut up, kid. So yeah, Dieter, I like that Dieter, he is this source of almost like innocence and purity, right? And then Heckle is just, yeah, he's a thief and wants the real rug. Somehow in my mind, I imagine that if they light the district on fire, Heckle's going to try to get in the store and steal the rug before it all goes up in flames, and Dieter's going to be like, what are we doing? But yeah, I like that Dieter gives him the judgmental look. He's like, what's with that look? And he's like, you're a thief. And he's like, shut up, keep your voice down, brat. What, you want me to feed you or not? And then Tenma is going to go into the candy bar, but this woman stops him and she's like, you're Asian. They're going to kill you if you walk in. Like, have you noticed the clientele that visits there? And she's like, no, that's not what I meant. She's like, you could get killed if you just waltz in there. She's like, my friend got taken away. She's like, that store's a nest of right-wingers. And she says that her friend was taken and she has a kid, so she wants to try to help her find her back. And again, what's interesting is that the Turkish woman, she asks Tenma to save her friend. And he doesn't reply. Again, Tenma is picking and choosing his battles and saying, I'm going to go after Johan. And he makes the active decision to not tell this woman he'll help save her friend. And there's a part of you as the audience that thinks, well, Tenma can't save everyone. And maybe Tenma has slowly come to that realization as time has gone on in this story that he can't save everyone. Because Tenma in episodes 1 through 4, again, would have been like, I can save you. I can heal you. I'll do all I can. And now he's realized, 1, that's not theoretically possible. And 2, he doesn't want to. He wants to just go after Johan, and he's already Tenma's got a lot on his plate. He's not only burdened with going after Johan to kill him, he's wanting to find Nina to help save her. So he's prioritizing that. And then I'm sure in the back of his mind, maybe he's thinking about Dieter and Heckel. Probably not. He's solely like tunnel vision onto Johan and Nina at this point. But he just looks at her. He just says, those guys took a friend of mine. And she's even like, well, what about Nina? What about this woman? Does she have blonde hair? And Tim was like, I don't know. It could be short. It could be long. I don't know. Like, he's just so disillusioned. And then she says they probably went to his mansion. And she said it was a red Mercedes. He's like, I've got to find that car and go after it. And she says, hey, save my friend too. Please. She has a small child. And Tenma he looks away. And that's when the car hits him. I thought maybe he dodged it. Nope. He gets smoked by it. I was not expecting that. Like, the animation makes it almost seem like he disappears for a moment and you're like, oh, like, did he jump out of the way? No, he got literally hit by a car. And she runs away and the baby is responsible for it. I'm like, oh my God. And then they take away her gun and lead her to this creepy dinner scene. Make note in anime, anytime there's a long table and a creepy dinner scene, run away. Just banana fish vibes, just leave. Things are probably not good, right? Probably not. So what's fascinating here is the green fruit that are on the table. Of all fruit, he's eating a honeydew. Honeydew melon is disgusting. I was like, I have a big bias. I can do cantaloupe. It's okay. Put some salt on it. It's fine. Honeydew it doesn't have a taste. And the same thing with pears. Pears and honeydew, they have a taste, but it's like bland. I don't know how to describe it. I know there's lots of people that love honeydew and they love pears, but I'm just like, oh. But he has the pears and the honeydew melon, which probably has another name. I'm from the South. We call it honeydew melon. And so he's like, oh, you're beautiful, as expected of Johan's sister. Great. And then he has what's interesting. Is it bad that I want the little skull clips? The little skull paper clips, the little skull clothespins are actually amazing, and I kind of want them. But then there's probably but then it's also for this cult, so no, I don't want them. But the number 4 is prevalent a lot in this scene. There are 4 stripes on the skull in the clothespin, right? There's 4 stripes on the clothespin. and that of the picture and stuff that he throws to her that she takes. And that's of Johann. So then we have Baby. We have Gild. He says he's, let me see, Gilditz and Wolf and Johann. They're the 4 for the organization. And then if you look at the piece of honeydew, there's 4 pieces of honeydew, and there are 4 pairs. Creepy. And General Wolf is in there as well. And he says there are 2 others. Together, the 4 of us created this organization. Okay, so Johann is the 5th. So there's another person. There's one more that we don't know of. We know of Baby, Gilditz, Wolf, and there's one more. And then Johann is the dragon fruit that is on top, like the crown. Johann is the golden fruit that's sitting on top of the 4 pairs. Okay. And he's like, would you like some fruit? And it's like, no, thank you. She's like, I just want to see my brother Johann. And he's like, oh, you'll meet him, as he's caressing this fruit creepily. I'm like, once he knows that you're here. And I love that she's just like, you guys have no clue where he is. You're just using me as bait. Like, this is a waste of my time. She's like, great, awesome. He's like, he needs you, which is just creepy. She's like, so you don't know where he is either, do you? And he's like, we need him to lead us. Nope. And so she's like, okay, why? And then he goes into this thing about Hitler having power and being a businessman. And he says that Johann is gaining power in one of those areas, either through military or business means. So there's a little backstory there that Johann he's gaining power. And we know he's had influence on the police. So there's that. And they're banking on his charisma, right? Ugh. And he says, what did he say there? He goes, he had a monstrous charisma since he was a child. As if he were Jesus Christ. It's like, well, maybe not that. Like, likening him to Christ is okay. We see the parallels, but it's not the same. He's like the 3 wise men from the east and John the Baptist. Okay, so that's interesting. So there's the 3 likening it to he's Jesus with the 3 wise men and John the Baptist. What's curious in that is that his analogy is very tailored to fit their organization. Like, they're cutting some corners, right? Because you could easily say, well, what about the 12 disciples? Why aren't you bringing them up? Why are you bringing up 3 wise men and John the Baptist, except they equal 4, which covers the 4 men of you? How convenient for that analogy that you only use figures that will tailor to meet your needs. Why not bring up the 12 disciples? There's not 12 of you, so how does that work? So yeah, it's like he's cherry picking the analogy to make it fit where it needs to, rather than be the most accurate. Now, my theory is that Baby, Gilditz, and Wolf are the 3 wise men. So who's John the Baptist? I feel like the one we don't know yet is probably the worst one of them all. So unless Hartman was one of them, but I don't feel that's the case, right? I don't feel like that's the case. So yeah, he says the 4 amazing people who realized Christ's talents. Creepy. We've been paying attention to Johann's talents since he was a kid. I don't know. And Nina's like, well, what should I do? And he's like, oh, you just sit here and wait till he comes to meet you. And she's like, fine, then I will. I love that Nina's like, fine, I'll wait here. I have to. And then poor Tenma, as soon as he had that pool stick, I was like, he's going to beat the snot out of Tenma with it. And he does. And it's not cool. But Tenma, I like that Tenma keeps asking him questions this whole time. And I don't know how Tenma's getting out of this. I don't know how he's getting out of it unless Nina saves him, but I don't know how that's going to work. If they're even in the same place. And And then, girl, Nina is out of a straight up horror movie at this point, right? Why is she doing this? I'm like, Nina, girl, because she hears this dripping noise and she's just like, I think I'll follow where that is. I'm like, you wouldn't make it out of a horror movie, would you? If there was a killer upstairs and the door open outside was wide open, you'd be like, I think I'll go upstairs and check it out. Although, as much as I'm mad that she just doesn't proceed with extra caution, she does have the gun strapped to her, so I guess that's enough caution for her. It is interesting that she hears the woman through the pipes, right? She hears the woman through the pipes, and it's the woman that has been kidnapped and tells her to save her. What's fascinating in this moment is we have, in connection to Tenma, Nina has a goal. Just like Tenma has a goal. And in this episode alone, Tenma is tempted to alter that goal to something else. He's tempted to alter the goal from finding Johan and finding Nina to also rescuing the woman that the other woman tells him about on the street. And he chooses to ignore that request and keep on looking for Nina and Johan. Nina has the same goal as Tenma, to find Johan and kill him, but then this woman shows up saying, hey, save me. And Nina's faced with the exact same decision that Tenma makes. She's like, I can do this one of two ways. What am I going to do? And it's like, she has this option in front of her. And what does she end up choosing? It seems like she's going to try to rescue the woman, but we don't know that for sure yet or not. But she does tell Nina, as Baby does as well, that they're going to set fire to the Turkish district tomorrow night. And that's going to be, it feels like the cult, they're going to burn the Turkish district to lure out Johan. To be like, it's almost like a sacrifice. We're going to sacrifice these people of Turkey to Johan so that he will come and lead us. What's the most fascinating about all of this is that I think Johan is a wee bit different from Hitler. That's the weirdest thing to say. I believe that he is, because Hitler wanted power and wanted to control a certain sect of people. I don't think Johan cares. I think Johan just wants to see people kill each other and revels in the thrill of people as they're dying. I don't think that, unlike Hitler wanted to control a sect of the population and eradicate something else. I don't think Johan cares. Johan is like the Joker. He just wants to cause chaos and watch the world burn. He doesn't have an ulterior motive of taking over and creating this pure society. At least at this point, we don't think he does. I think he just wants to revel in people killing each other and just savoring their final moments. I don't think he cares what happens to what. Now, based on what they've seen as children crossing over from Czechoslovakia, we may find out that Johan does have some ulterior motive, and maybe there is an agenda he has. But as of right now, from what we, the audience, know about Johan, he does not seem to care who he is harming. He has a set pattern with the married couples that don't have kids. So there's something tied to that, but we don't know what yet. But I feel like he wouldn't want to, I feel like Johan would kill these guys because he's just like, I can, so I'm going to. I feel like Johan doesn't want to lead an organization. Johan just wants to cause chaos from the darkness, right? I just don't know. I feel like these guys are going to do all these things thinking that Johan's going to, be thankful to them. And I think Johan in the end would kill them just out of spite because he can, because he's a psychopath. So I don't know. Just get those vibes, right? But it is curious. We know next to nothing about Johan and Nina. We know next to nothing about their circumstance. And so there's all this mystery surrounding his character that the episodes are slowly trickling out. But it's fascinating, the theme in this series about how we view each other and our values. like what we value and how we view others and their values. It's a fascinating theme in this. And in this episode, it really comes out. Like, what do people care for? What's their motivation? Why are they doing the things they're doing? Because, yeah, these three, the creepy cult has their own mission and their own agenda and their reasons. Nina and Tenma have their own reasons and their own missions. Even Heckle has the reasons why he's doing the things that he does. And Dieter's just kind of the innocent on the sidelines questioning it, right? So, man, this episode was absolute insanity. And I'm really hyped up by it, and I'm really excited by it, and I want to know what happens next. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait a whole week. I just don't know. But the ball is in the court now. There's lots of things, lots of questions. One, what is Nina going to do? Is she going to rescue the woman? What does she do then? Is the woman a liability? What do we do with that? Is she going to send the woman to help tell the people to get out of the town before it burns? How do we do that? How does she let her escape without being caught? She's got the gun on her. Does she waste the gun to save the woman instead of killing Johan? How does that work? Tenma, how is he getting out of this situation? Because I have no clue how he's getting out since he's tied up and getting beat to a pulp. Are they going to just leave him there and he gets out himself, like cuts the rope somehow and goes? Is he going to go warn the city, or is he going to go after Johan? That is the trolley car problem. Is, are Nina and Tenma going to warn the city that the Turkish district's going to get burned down so they can escape, or are they going to go after Johan? I feel like it's set up like a trolley problem of they can either go and save the town, or they can wait for Johan. But it can't be both. They either let Johan slip away, or they save the people. And I'm hoping Tenma realizes that, yeah, Heckle and Dieter are still in the Turkish district. They're still there. They could be in danger. And that has some bearing in his mind. But it's slowly becoming more and more apparent that Tenma is becoming obsessed with Johan. He's like a drug. So it's fascinating that he's so condescending towards Messner when I'm like, you're getting addicted just like Messner was. Should you be condescending towards him? I don't know. But I'm worried. Of course I'm worried for Heckle and Dieter. I'm always worried for them. But I'm curious to know. I feel at the end of the day, Nina at least is going to give up looking for Johan to save the people. Will Tenma do the same? What will come of it? I don't know. But I'm excited to find out, hopefully, more answers in episode 16. So, I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. This was great, but I'm excited to see what's going to happen next. I hope you all are too. So, in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I will be back very soon with episode 16 of Monster. Bye.